So, at a conference that is about humans and technology, I think it's good that we first ask, in the future, are we even going to need people at all? Computers and technology is getting smarter. It's getting better at doing things that we already do. And at some point in maybe the not too distant future, we might get to a point where we see superintelligence, the singularity, when technology becomes better than humans. This is at least things that people like Nick Bostrom has talked about in his famous book, Superintelligence. People like Elon Musk, Stephen Hawking, Bill Gates have all discussed their fears around. And when we look at what's happening with technology and artificial intelligence in the world right now, we do see it getting a lot better, and it getting better at doing things that we already do. Is it going to take our jobs? We see things like driverless cars already on the horizon. This is the Lutz Pathfinder pod, which is already in development and being tested in Milton Keynes in the UK. But there's stuff going on in Europe, there's stuff going on in the US to test these things, and this stuff will take people's jobs. Drivers, cab drivers, lorry drivers are all going to lose their jobs if we start moving to these automated, intelligent systems. The graph in the middle is from a paper by Osborne and Frey from a couple of years ago. It was really the start of this discussion about whether robots are going to take our jobs. And one of the things that they found, based on a number of assumptions about what could be automated in the near future, was that 47% of jobs in the US had a high probability of being automated in the near future. And that's pretty scary for people. So are robots going to take our jobs? And one of the interesting things about the analysis that Osborne and Frey did is one of the assumptions, or one of the things that they assumed couldn't be automated, is that of creativity. And we've just heard that creativity is incredibly important. But computers are getting better at that as well. There are systems out there that can paint pictures, pretty aesthetically pleasing pictures, and they understand how to make something aesthetically pleasing. They can write poetry as well. Some of it not particularly good, but they're getting better. Most of these examples are from Goldsmiths University in London, from the creative computing department. And a lot what they do is think about actually what the nature of creativity is and how looking at computational creativity helps us understand what's going on. And they are getting better at replicating what can be done, even building video games from computers. So should we worry? Yes, but not because of the stuff I've just been talking about. That stuff we don't need to worry about, and we shouldn't worry about. Superintelligence, if it ever happens, is a very long way away. At the moment, we are in a situation where technology is pretty dumb. Even the smartest AI can do very specific tasks, and that's about it. The other thing is, we don't really understand what superintelligence even means. What that looks like, how that operates, is completely up in the air. So while it's an interesting way to think about the future, it's not worth spending too much time worrying about. Another reason is that it's pretty hard to predict the future anyway, even if we're only talking about a couple of years in the future, which Bill Gates, when he said 2 years from now, spam will be solved in 2004, well knows. And superintelligence, or generally very smart AI, requires a lot of things to happen before we get there. There is a lot of different factors that need to go right and need to happen in the right way for us to reach that point. The other reason that I don't want us to talk about superintelligence or robots stealing our job anymore is that it's irresponsibly distracting from stuff that we do need to worry about. And we do need to talk about AI for a lot of different reasons. AI is just a tool. Like any other piece of technology, it is about how it's used, how it's designed, who uses it for what, that makes it good or makes it bad. So before we start discussing a bit more the reasons why we need to talk about it, and particularly why NGOs need to be aware of what's going on with AI, let's discuss what AI is. So the description of AI is pretty broad, and it can mean a lot of things. It's basically just the study of how to create an artificial agent. But what that means is very broad. That can mean a program that when the temperature in a room goes below a certain threshold, it then turns on the heater. That doesn't sound particularly smart, but that's pretty much AI. In practice, that means a computer has to behave or perform a task like an intelligent agent. But this is all what is described as narrow AI. So programs that can do very specific tasks they've been designed to do. What computers are increasingly being asked to do is infer new knowledge from data and from things that are going on in the world. And this is where one particular aspect of AI, the use of machine learning algorithms, is really important. And this is, for the rest of this talk, when we talk about AI, this is pretty much what I'm talking about, is the use of machine learning algorithms to gain some knowledge about the world, some new insight. So what is machine learning? So machine learning is a really cool piece of technology. It's been around for a long time. The first developments of this date right back to the 50s and 60s when these algorithms were first being developed. But what it is a way of automating the process of building a program. So if you don't use this form of AI, when you build a program to, say, raise the temperature of the room when it goes below a certain threshold, you need to program in every single decision that program makes. You need to program in all of the variables, all of the factors that it needs to consider. Machine learning algorithms allow us to skip that really time-consuming, quite intensive effort bit, and take data, take information, and feed that into the algorithm, and use that to then shape how the algorithm works. So what does that mean? So let's take houses and house prices as an example. If you wanted to understand how house prices were affected by things like where the house is located, if it has a garden, how many rooms it has, all sorts of other things, how gentrified the area is. And you want to understand how that relates to the price of the house. And you have data for all of that information. If you feed that into the algorithm, so you give the algorithm the input data, so the information about bedrooms, location, etc., and you give it the output information, so how much that house is worth, the algorithm is then able to make correlations between those. Basically, the way it works is kind of like building an equation that goes from output to input, understanding the relationships between those two things. And the way it does this is through its specific architecture, so there are lots of different types of machine learning algorithms. And the way that they process the data is the kind of important bit. And each bit of it will try and define a weight to each of those different variables and how that relates to the price. So I'm sure, as you can think now, there are lots and lots of different applications to this, and it's really exciting. But the machine still needs people. If you think about that process that I was just talking about, someone has to design, someone has to build, someone has to test, someone has to use it, and someone has to interpret it. And at every point in that development, value-based judgments are being made. So it's very much people encoding their beliefs or their ideas about the world into the algorithm. And I haven't even talked about the data. So even before you use the algorithm, the way the data is collected, the kind of classifications that are used, how that data is collected will all impact on actually what the outputs that come from that. And all of those things are based on human judgments as well. So it means that the human is very much in the system. Technology is only half the equation. The other half is how we use it and what we do with it. So why do we need to think about AI? And why, particularly as NGOs, do I think you need to start thinking about this seriously? First reason, AI is already changing our lives. Machine learning is incredibly pervasive in our society. It's not always obvious, but it is there. Secondly, AI offers huge potentials in all areas, particularly for NGOs. There are lots of opportunities out there to get new insights, all sorts of things. Thirdly, we need to think about it because human-computer interactions are generally quite difficult, and AI makes them harder. Fourth, we need to try and promote responsible innovation in this area and understand where the negative impacts are and what they are. There is a lot that's already going on, and there are a lot of well-documented, serious cases of negative impacts out there. Discrimination, bias, all these things which actually affect people's lives. So let's go through these. So firstly, AI and machine learning is already out there in the world. It's already changing our lives, changing the way we work. This is everything from Google, Facebook, the algorithms that they use to define their search engines or define their news feeds. These have a huge impact on your life and everyone's lives. They basically define what content you see on the internet because they are the gatekeepers to the internet. So whenever Google or Facebook changes one of those algorithms, it means what comes up on your screen is very different. And the upshot of that, because they are such important gatekeepers to the rest of the internet, to content that is elsewhere, the content elsewhere then starts to change what it looks like, what it says, and what it does in response to that, to try and improve the number of clicks that they get through, improve their ad ratings, improve the amount of revenue they can get through ads and things like that. So it's really impacting on everything that you see. But beyond that, governments are starting to use this stuff as well. Governments have been using algorithms, simple algorithms, for a long time. But they are now starting to explore AI, machine learning, how these things can be used to either improve government services or, in some cases, automate some of the very simple tasks. Washington, the White House, the US are using this stuff. States are using it for all sorts of things. The UK government is doing a big project in trying to work out actually how it can use this stuff more. Importantly, how it can use it ethically, which is good. And this stuff is being used to make life or death choices. So the NSA uses a machine learning algorithm to decide who in Pakistan is a terrorist and therefore who they should kill with drone strikes. So it's serious stuff. Now, that's quite an extreme example, but there is a lot of other stuff that's going on. So decisions about who should get welfare, who should be able to get a passport passed. All these things, there are elements that machine learning algorithms are being used to decide. And it's pretty serious. And we need to understand what this means for our future. And this is really important because the more we start relying on things like AI, data, machine learning algorithms, the more it's going to change our perception of the world and our relationships with government. And we need to think about what that actually means and whether that's a world that we want to live in and how we need to intervene if we want to change things. But AI is hugely powerful. There are huge opportunities there for all sorts of things. Gaining new insights, making better decisions, providing personalized services. Healthcare in particular could benefit hugely from this. When we look at things like drug efficacy rates, 1/3 of the people in the world will have very different, will be affected by drugs in a very different way to the other 2/3. So that means, though you might take, I don't know, say aspirin, for you that might be half as effective as paracetamol or something. So it means if we can personalize treatments much better, they'll be much more effective. We can gain new insights on the world. We can augment human capabilities. And we can even do things like, as citizens, understand the world better and do stuff better. At NESTA, we are an NGO. We are a charity that focuses on innovation for the social good, and we use this stuff in some of our work. Some of the reports that we do that look at the collaborative economy, the creative economy in the UK, look at where technology is happening in the UK and what's going on. We use alternative data sources, we scrape websites, and we use machine learning systems to analyze that stuff. So it is really helpful. But it requires some imagination and experimentation. And the problem with experimentation is that sometimes it's not going to work. Sometimes it's going to fail. But as long as we can understand why it's failing and gain insights about what works, then that's really important. Unfortunately, even though this stuff is really happening in the world right now, not enough experimentation or evaluation is happening. And really what we need to understand is how we promote responsible innovation in this area, how we understand those negative impacts. And at the moment, we don't have good ways of doing this. And what responsible innovation means is still quite an open question. But the more we think about it, the more we explore it, the better we're going to be able to understand actually how we use this stuff for social good, to understand our world better, and not to reinforce existing biases that we have, not to put those value judgments in that are going to reinforce existing discrimination or that are going to cause people who already don't benefit from, say, statewide interventions. And lastly, on a practical note, AI presents a new problem for human-computer interactions. Partly because of the discussion around superintelligence and the idea that the robots are capable of automating 47% of jobs that exist. People don't really understand actually what's possible, what you can use this stuff for, and what the limitations are. What is not going to happen is all of those jobs become completely automated. AI will probably be used to automate some simple tasks, and that might make some jobs more irrelevant than others. But what is going to happen broadly is that jobs are going to change, and probably your jobs are going to change. And that means that you're going to be working closer with these systems, and it means that you have to understand how they operate. You have to have a decent understanding of their capabilities and limitations. And trust is really hard. And actually where stuff has been evaluated, where people have looked at the interactions between humans and computers when you're using AI systems, they find that a lot of people either trust it too much, so don't question the output that comes out, or don't trust it at all. Interestingly, some of the public engagement exercises that have been going on in the UK in recent years have found that a large proportion of people don't even believe that data science can do the stuff it can do. So there's a really big public engagement gap here. We need a public dialogue, and it's something that is happening a little bit in the US and a little bit in the UK. I don't know about Poland, but I assume maybe a little bit. But we need to improve that, and we need to get more people involved in this, because they need to, when we're thinking about responsible innovation, people need to be involved in the dialogue of what we want to happen and how we want that to happen. Understanding is the second big issue then. Understanding things like it doesn't work like a human. It is able to do its specific task, but it can't look outside of that. It doesn't have common sense reasoning. And it sometimes will fail, but that doesn't mean that it's a failure. There are always going to be things like false positives and false negatives. What we need is then a way when that happens, that we can see that it's happening and that we can do something about it. So if a decision is made about somebody, say for example, if a passport application is automated or a machine learning system is used to decide whether somebody is a terrorist or not, that they know that that's happening. Firstly, there's some transparency that an automated system or a machine learning system is being used. And secondly, that there is some recourse that they have. So would you trust a machine? It's a big question, but when you get this right, when you work closely with computers, you can do amazing things, and it can be beautiful. So this is a video. Let's see if we can get it to work. So this is an artistic performance, which is a collaboration between a dance group and a digital developer. And so those lights are controlled by an AI system, by machine learning, which is designed to learn from the way that the dancers move and then respond to them. So what you're seeing is a collaboration between the dancers, between the machine. And what's great about this is it's augmenting both of their performances. And this is what we should be looking for when we think about using computers, using machine learning, using AI. So lastly, I'm going to leave you with this. We have an opportunity, but we also have a responsibility to get this right. There are opportunities for you to make good use of this stuff, but I think there is also a responsibility to hold people to account, to push for things like transparency, to push for things like due process and adequate systems of recourse. In Germany, they are starting to think about how they can, what legislation they can put in place to force companies like Google and Facebook to reveal to their customers when an algorithm is making a decision and how that algorithm works. Now, that doesn't mean displaying the algorithm itself, because that's not actually that helpful. Most people don't understand how it works, and even if you do have that algorithm, not having the data means that you can't see what it's doing. But having adequate and useful ways of explaining, interpretable ways of explaining what the machine is doing is really vital. And new EU legislation around data privacy, which I haven't really touched on, but is a big part of this, is starting to push then for where people are being profiled, that those companies or those organizations need to provide adequate, interpretable descriptions of what is happening. So there you go. I'm going to leave it up to you now to then do something, to explore this within your institutions, but also to make sure that that public dialogue is done well, that there is an adequate understanding amongst people about what is possible and what isn't possible, so that we don't just focus on this idea, this slightly irrelevant idea of superintelligence, but actually look about where things are happening now and what we can do about it. Thank you.